I picked up an iron skillet at a yard sale recently. It's in pretty rough shape. It's got a lot of rust, some rust pitting. There's no seasoning on it whatsoever, but I'm going to restore it so it can actually be used and bring it back to life a little bit. See a lot of rust down in here. Some pitting over here on the bottom of it. A bunch of rust on the back of it. So I'm going to start with stripping it down completely, and then I'll re-season it. So I'm using a wire wheel to do this, but you could do it with a fine sandpaper or something just to take all the rust out. I'm going to try to get some of the pitting out also, make sure there's no rust down in the pits. I just want to clean it up real good. That's why I'm using a wire wheel. Alright, that's most of the rust. There's still some rust dust on it that'll wash off. That got most of the big stuff off in the pitting. So now I'm going to take it inside of the sink and actually wash the loose dust and stuff off of it. Give it a good scrub with some dish soap just so everything's clean. And then I'll work on seasoning it. So I finished scrubbing it with the wire wheel. You can use steel wool if you don't have a wire wheel. I wanted to get all the rust off. That completely takes the seasoning out of it. Now I've got to get some more rust out of the handle here. And there's a little bit on the back. There's still a little bit more rust there. But what I'm going to do now is scrub it with soap. As you can see, there's still a lot of dust from using the wire wheel and rust powder on it. So I'm going to put it in the sink, and you can use Dawn dish soap and a scrubbing pad, something similar to this. Or you could use SOS pad. That's what I'm going to use. But I have a white composite sink in the kitchen, so I don't want to scratch that up, because this cast iron will scratch that or scuff it up pretty bad. So I'm just going to put a towel down in the sink and use this Brillo pad and scrub it up real good. That's the oven preheating. I'm heating it up to about 200 so that once I get it all clean and scrubbed with the steel wool, then I'll put it in the oven at about 200 degrees for, I don't know, 15 minutes or so, just long enough to dry all the water off of it so it doesn't rust. And then we'll season it. Well, I'm going to put Crisco on it in order to season it. The vegetable oil tends to spoil if you leave it sitting on cast iron surfaces for a long time. You can use lard, but that's not as common, and it's hard to find. So Crisco is easy to find in any grocery store, and it works well. It'll stay on there for a long time. But see how dirty all that soapy water is? That's from I'm pulling the rust powder and the grime out of the bottom of this skillet. But I want to clean it up inside and out real good, just so there's no more rust on it. Clean the sink up before my wife sees it. It's still hanging out to dry. She thinks I ruined her sink. I just want to dry most of the water off, but there's still water down inside the pores of that metal that I really need to heat up, and it'll expand that metal a little bit, open up those pores and evaporate that water out. And then while it's still hot, I'll put some Crisco in it, and then that'll soak up into the pores and protect it from rusting in the future. So it's not looking too bad. So now I'm going to stick it in the oven on 200 degrees for about 15-20 minutes, just long enough to make sure it's good and dry. Heat the metal up real good. Then I'll pull it out and we can season it. Alright, we'll let that sit for about 20 minutes and we'll pull it out and season it. Okay, so it's good and dry now. It's nice and hot. So I'm going to use just regular Crisco. You can use whatever kind of oil you want. I wouldn't use bacon grease just because that'll tend to spoil. But I like to fold up a paper towel and just dip that down in the Crisco. I'm going to wipe the skillet down inside and out. I want a nice layer of Crisco all over it, on all the surfaces. And then I'm going to bake that in. And I want to use a different paper towel each time just so I don't get any of this black residue down in the Crisco. And normally when you season your cast iron, you're not going to be doing the outside of it. This is just the initial seasoning to keep it from rusting. Since I scrubbed it with the wire wheel and I took all of the seasoning out of it. So I'm gonna bake this in the oven for actually about an hour. And I wanna bump the temperature up to about 400 degrees so it really opens those pores up in the cast iron and lets that oil get inside the pores. Okay, so I've got oil all over it. I want to put it on a cookie sheet upside down, because when I put it in the oven, some of the oil is going to drip down into the oven, and you don't want that dripping down in your oven. So you can either put this right on the wire rack upside down, and put the cookie sheet or aluminum foil down below that. But it works just as well to set it on directly on the cookie sheet and throw it in the oven. So now I'm going to set another timer for an hour, let that bake in for a little bit, and then we'll pull it out and check it. So it's been in the oven now for an hour at 400 degrees. It's going to be very hot, so be careful taking it out. And it's going to put the odor of hot cast iron throughout your house. So you may want to open up a window while you do this. And you don't have to do this every time you cook with it, and you don't have to restore it like this, but you can see that the whole skillet is now black and seasoned. So I'm just going to take a paper towel and wipe some of the excess oil off of it. Yeah, you only need to do that when you want to just completely restore the cast iron, not every time you use it. When you use it normally for cooking, you don't want to use tomato-based products in it. Those have it has acid in it that will take the seasoning out of it, so you don't want to cook spaghetti sauce or anything in cast iron. They're great for frying. You can fry eggs or steaks, bacon, stuff like that, hamburgers. And that grease from the food when you cook in it actually adds an additional layer of seasoning to it. So while it's still real hot, I'm just going to add a little bit more to the inside. You don't have to, but I like to get a nice base layer going on the inside, and it helps create a non-stick surface. And when you have it seasoned well, it'll act like a Teflon skillet and not stick at all. So I'll do another video on how to season it after you use it to cook with. But I don't know if you can see, there we go. So that's what the inside of it looks like now. So it looks a lot better than it did. You can notice I have a glass top stove here, and I cook in cast iron on the glass top stove all the time. It doesn't damage the surface of the stove at all. You just don't want to slam it down on the stove. You might crack the glass then, but it doesn't, the heat from the skillet doesn't bother the stove. But I am gonna set it on a trivet for now since it's so hot. I've had it baking in that oven for so long. But I'm just gonna sit it there and let it cool down to room temperature, and then I'll be able to put it away and use it to cook with. So, again, that's how you restore a cast iron skillet.